Hey everyone, it's Fitz with your daily delivery. Hope you're doing well. I am great, mostly because I didn't have to use my brain much today. There's not much left of it, but there is some functioning parts. But today, my research comes from one of my favorite X accounts, PowerCat Ryan. Always does a great job researching things, and he had a tweet, and I flat out told him, I'm stealing that. I always give credit, but I do steal stuff from Twitter, X, whenever possible, because I don't have a functioning brain. PowerCat Ryan did some great research, and once I told him I was going to borrow this, well, he gave me a lot more. Way too much to communicate here in this 4 or 5 minute daily delivery. But let's get to it because it's fascinating. What if I told you Kansas State is one of the most successful football programs, college football programs, in the last 30 years? You probably would say, define that. And I'd say top 15 most victories, and you would think I'm crazy. You see, the story of Kansas State football in some way starts in 1995, 30 years ago. That's when I left the newspaper business to come cover Kansas State full time, at first for the Wichita Eagle, doing a magazine, but that time for me is very special too, and 1995 seemed to be when the program really started to click. Of course, they went to a bowl in 93 and 94, but 95 was the Cotton Bowl, and off they went, and great years of success. Ron Prince came in, the winning kind of slowed down in there, and then Chris Kleiman took over. And yet, through 30 years, a program known for having a horrendous history of college football, the most losing program in the history of the college game when Bill Snyder took over in 1989. The first program to lose 500 games. But in the last 30 years, which I think we agree is a fairly significant stretch of time. I mean, I can't imagine if I did a review of the same statistic in 1995 going back to 65. And it's about that range when I start establishing what were the Blue Bloods. It's somewhere in there and before, those programs that were always on TV, the ones that won a lot when people were just beginning to watch college football at home. But the last 30 years have been interesting because Kansas State is indeed one of the most successful college football programs over that period. Folks, this isn't a few years, 30 years. Now, they're not in the top 10. Let's pop up the top 10 right here so you can get a look at what I'm talking about. Now, a few caveats here before we start. This is adjusted for vacated wins. SEC, we see you. You've dropped a lot of wins that you had, but you had to get back because you cheated. And also, all these tiebreakers are done by winning percentage. With one exception, when we get to number 20, there's two schools there because, well, they're tied by percentage everything. They're identical. So here we go. Here's the top 10. Pretty usual suspects here, right? Georgia, Oklahoma, Boise State. How about that? The Broncos at number 3. That is a prolonged stretch of success in Boise. Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, Florida, Texas, Oregon, Wisconsin. Maybe Wisconsin surprises you a little bit. That gets us from 297 victories over 30 years. Think about that. Georgia's averaging almost 10 victories a season. It's absolutely incredible. And now the next 10 would be this. Florida State, Virginia Tech, and here comes the Big 12, 3 in a row. BYU, TCU, Kansas State, 13, 14, and 15. Kansas State has 244 victories over those 30 years. Amazing. They're ahead of USC, which they're tied with because of the tiebreaker, but also they got 2 victories over USC to kind of decide that head-to-head. They won the home and home series with them during this span. And then you got a program called Nebraska. They were really good before this chart was started. Utah, Miami, Florida, and then the tie at number 20, and Oklahoma State and Tennessee. Some of the programs that didn't make the list of the top 20, 21 here, LSU, Auburn, Michigan, Iowa, Texas A&M, Notre Dame, Missouri, Penn State, Michigan State, Washington. They've all had fewer wins over the last 30 years than Kansas State. But why isn't Kansas State regarded as one of the top 20 programs in all of college football? 30 years is a prolonged period of time. That's a key stretch of recent success. And they're number 15. I guarantee you most people around the country would have no clue about that. But they are. And here's why Kansas State probably isn't regarded among those top teams. So many teams that are listed after them are the Blue Bloods, or at least huge brands in the game of college football. And here's 5 schools Kansas State has more victories than in the last 30 years. Okay? Nebraska, Miami, Tennessee, Auburn, and Michigan. All of them have fewer victories over 30 years than Kansas State. And they have a combined 7 national championships. What happened in 1998 looms large in the history of Kansas State football. So close to playing for a national title and collapses with a late fumble and a loss in the championship game. What separates Kansas State from the myth of the great programs around the country? It's a national title. And as we discussed on this week's PowerCat podcast, can Kansas State ever compete for one? Well, I'll say this. Kansas State needs to keep these stats in mind, these victories in mind, because when you sit down at a table and they're also looking at schools such as Nebraska and Miami and other big names, LSU, Michigan, you're ahead of them in the victories over the last 30 years. You belong at that table, Kansas State, even though you may not feel like it. You may not be totally invited yet. It's time the program starts acting like it.